The Milwaukee Bucks the other day absolutely wiped the floor with the Golden State Warriors. They ended up winning by just 19 points, but they led by as much as 30 at halftime. Giannis recorded a 30-point triple-double in less than 30 minutes of action and looked like damn Wilt Chamberlain out there, and the Bucks just overall looked extremely dominant in spite of the fact that they were missing a few players. And after this game, it felt as though the collective response on Twitter was, oh yeah, the Bucks exist. My whole damn Twitter feed felt as though it was like, oh yeah, the defending champions are good at basketball. Who would have guessed? So for those who weren't aware, it seems necessary somewhat to remind people, and maybe even a little bit myself, that the Milwaukee Bucks are a serious threat to win the 2022 championship, and their name has kind of gone under the radar weirdly as the defending champs. Also, there is some stuff to catch up on in regards to the changes with this roster that I feel like have also gone undermentioned, as the entire team has gone undermentioned. So let's talk about the changes with the Bucks, what they look like versus other teams, and how their odds look for repeating as champions. Let's get into it. Before I continue on with this video, about half the people that watch these videos are not subscribed, so if you've fallen that 50%, then please subscribe. I'm trying to hit 300,000 subscribers on this channel by the end of the year, so your subscription would be much appreciated. Also drop a like, it only takes 1 second and makes a massive difference. I'm also like 700 subs away from 200K, so if you could give me there, I'd appreciate it. I think the main reason the Bucks took so damn long to get any kind of recognition this year is they started the season off very, very poorly due to a lot of injuries. And as they gradually creeped back into the regularly scheduled dominance, other teams had become the headline and been the talking point, and everyone's just like, oh yeah, the Bucks are back, that's cool. Let's talk about the Chicago Bulls or whatever. I'm still not used to my team being talked about in a positive light. So that was like kind of a reality moment there. That was weird. As a result, the Milwaukee Bucks slipped under the radar and no one's really talked about them. And honestly, I can't be too critical of other people for that, whether it be fans or media outlets, because I'm guilty of the very same thing. I feel like among the NBA's top of the top teams, I've probably talked about and watched the Milwaukee Bucks the least this year. But with all that said, let's catch up with the Milwaukee Bucks and see how they have been doing this year and the changes with the roster. There are a couple of big differences with this team versus last year. The biggest one, and one that is very vindicating to me, is the absence of Brook Lopez. Brook Lopez has played 1 game this year, so starting in his place has been Bobby Portis, who has been phenomenal for them and having a career year. Bobby is averaging 15 and 9 this year on 48, 43, 79 splits. He is also taking a career high 4.5 threes per game, again on 43%. He is also playing the best and, most importantly, most consistent defense of his career. Why is this vindicating for me? Well, I have been firmly in the camp of Brook Lopez isn't very good and the Bucks should move on from him. And I'm kind of like the only guy in that camp because I don't know that many people care. But the entirety of the postseason last year, if you watch my post-game recaps, all I was doing was ranting about how much Brook Lopez was a detriment to his team. There are 2 arguments that people make in favor of Brook Lopez when I say these negative things about him, and both of them are bad because he's not nearly as good at either of these 2 things as people claim him to be. Those 2 things are spacing and his role on the defensive end. Defensively, Brook Lopez is good at being a big player because he is a big player and he knows how to position himself in the right spot in front of the basket. And that is not nothing. There is something to be said for just simply being a big body. But he can get burned on the perimeter, which happened a lot in the Suns finals with Booker and CP3 in the pick and roll, and thus the Bucks tried to avoid the mismatch with different matchups, but ultimately going small, well, it's not that small because Giannis is nearly 7 feet tall, but with Giannis at center, that ultimately ended up being the solution. The solution was not to work around it, it was just, we're better with Brook Lopez on the bench. So his defensive impact really isn't there because the Bucks defensive lineups were at their best with Giannis at the 5, PJ Tucker out there at the 4, the versatility on the perimeter, the switchability. It's the modern game. A 7-footer who can barely move is not that important defensively anymore. The next thing is the 3-point shooting, which is another area where Brook Lopez is like public enemy number 1 for me. And the thing that I complain about a lot, which is people claiming someone to be a good shooter based on position and not what's actually a good shooter. If I tell you that a player over the last 3 seasons has shot 34% from 3 on 5 attempts, you wouldn't call them a bad shooter, but you also wouldn't really call them good. They're right down the level of mediocre. But suddenly, if I tell you that that player is a 6'10" big man, now he's Splash Mountain. Now, how does 33% on 4 attempts in the playoffs sound? Not particularly good. How about 31% on 3 attempts? Because that's what he averaged in last year's playoff run. Brook Lopez ain't a shooter like that. He's just not. He's not a non-shooter, but he's not a shooter really either. Brook Lopez is all right at spacing the floor. He's okay at it. And then he's not that good defensively and only within a very limited role, which is exploitable. Meanwhile, Bobby Portis is shooting 43% on similar volume to Brook Lopez. He shot 47% from 3 last year because he's an actually good shooter. And with him starting at the 5, Milwaukee's defense is better than it was last year. 3 points per game better in defensive rating, and that has moved them from 10th in defense to 9th this year. The team does not need Brook Lopez. Bobby Portis is a stud, and I was right. Suck it. Do the Maxi Kleber trade that I recommended in my 1 trade for every team video because that would allow them to do the Giannis small ball center thing. Bobby Portis is better at actually being the kind of center that the Bucks need, so when they want to go small, that would be an option. Either way, they don't need Brook Lopez and they should trade him. And I wouldn't be surprised if they traded him, being that he makes a decent amount of salary and he's older and he's not that good anymore. Outside of that, the next big noticeable difference is Grayson Allen, who has been starting at the 2 for the Bucks this year and has been really, really good for them. Now, I don't know how playable Grayson is going to end up being in the playoffs because his defense when he isn't injuring his opponents isn't particularly great, and because he's small, he could be targeted, but he is taking 7 threes a game, shooting 39%. He might be their best catch and shoot player. Pat Connaughton, about 6 threes a game, similar percentage, so that's really the only competition in that area, but he is also having a career year from outside. Jordan Nwora is a player that I had high hopes for after he killed it in the preseason, and he is having a pretty alright year and shooting 39% from 3 on 4 attempts per game. Basically, everyone is on the upswing from outside, Drew Holiday among them. Chris Middleton's the only one who's really down, as well as Dante DiVincenzo, who has been really bad since coming back from injury, but I'm hopeful that he can turn it around. The Bucks as a whole have just gotten better at shooting and shot more. They went from 12th in 3-point attempt rate. They went from 12th in the league in 3-point attempt rate last year to 5th this year. And this is a team that struggled from 3 in the playoffs and succeeded in spite of that negative. So if they're actually going to hit their shots from outside for this year's playoff run, that team is that much scarier, and they were already good enough to win a championship. Outside of that, Drew Holiday has been better in this regular season. Chris Middleton's efficiency is way down, but it started off a real poor and has gradually gotten a little bit better, so I have hopes that he's going to be back to what he was. But last but not least, let's talk about Giannis. He's Giannis. That is the end of this video. People should like it. Okay, I'm not doing the whole thing. For real, another conversation from last night's game was the MVP race. Giannis has been treated in this MVP race, and I'm guilty of this as much as anybody, of kind of getting the same treatment that Tim Duncan does in the top 10 of all time. Whenever we're having a conversation of the top 10 players of all time, very often it's like, oh yeah, Tim Duncan, duh, I forgot about him, moving on. It's kind of the same thing with Giannis, where it's just like, yeah, he's in the MVP race, moving on. No one's really talking about his case at length. Partially because we've already seen it 2 times, but regardless, Giannis's case has kind of gone under the radar, and it almost feels as though at this point, he's starting to get his way towards the top of the conversation almost by default. With Steph Curry having the worst shooting slump of his career by far, which it still baffles me that has continued as long as it has. Kevin Durant's efficiency having dipped substantially. This is the worst true shooting percentage season of his career in a while, which is crazy because he's still very efficient, but he used to be very, very, very efficient, and now he's just very efficient. So it's less of a huge leg up than he used to have. LeBron and Jokic's teams are really not good enough to win it. Joel Embiid is kind of getting in the race as of late as the Sixers have been better, but I still think Giannis has a better case. So Giannis is kind of falling into the top of the MVP race by default because all these other pieces are dropping down. So Giannis might win MVP this year. It might just have to be him. And I hate to phrase it like that because if he's just the best player in the league on one of the best teams, then maybe he should just win it. But I don't know. Voter fatigue is a thing. But with Giannis being Giannis, Chris and Drew being relatively back to normal. Drew is a little bit up, Chris is a little bit down. Their shooting as a whole being a lot better. Bobby Portis having a career year. Grayson Allen having a career year. Brook Lopez not mattering and probably being on the way out. And really just this team seeming to have improved as a whole. The Bucks can beat anybody. They can beat anybody confidently. And looking at the top contenders, the Warriors, the Suns, the Nets, none of them are equipped to slow down Giannis, which to be fair, all but like 2 or 3 teams are, which by the way is why it really pisses me off when people criticize the Bulls for that, as if there's many teams out there that can stop Giannis. Like, oh my god, the Bulls are gonna get killed inside by Giannis. So is every other team. Why are we doing this gatekeeping for a team that's new at contention? Like, there's ways to get around it. Shut the fuck up. Sidebar. I don't know. Basically, the point is the Bucks are good. And don't forget about them because you're gonna learn when the playoffs come around. I'm pretty sure of that. As of right now, I would still bet on the Warriors to win it all because I think not only is Steph in a shooting slump, kind of the whole team is. I think they're gonna bounce back and be fine, especially with Klay Thompson returning. But the Bucks are probably my second, not even probably, they are my second pick. And then after that, I don't know, like the Suns or something. No, probably the Nets. Yeah, the Nets. Either way. I didn't mean to do a whole ranking of contenders right now, but the point is, what is the point? The Bucks. Shout out to Rudy for editing this video. That is the end of this video. Please be sure to like and subscribe for more NBA content like this, and cue the outro music.